In this video, we're going to continue with the fictional Green Mountain Militia. This particular video, the subject will be base camps. This was a request by someone who wanted to know a little bit more about them, what would be in them and that stuff. The previous videos on base camps, we were occupying a wooded area where there was no structures in it. In this one, we have a abandoned town that was high up in the mountains. No one has lived there in, let's say, 50, 60 years. Most of the structures have fallen down. There were only 2 structures that were still usable and considered occupiable. They weren't in such a dilapidated state that they would fall over onto people that were occupying it. Now, the Green Mountain Militia refers to this particular site as the Briar Camp. Before the conflict occurred, they went out reconning in their anticipated area of operations. They found this old town high up in the mountains that no one even remembered was really up there, except a couple of people that lived on the mountain. They did their recons at times where it would be least expected, primarily during hunting seasons, which would allow them to move through the area and no one would find it strange on what they were doing when they were checking where the game was at, and then actually during the season when they're out hunting. When hunting season was over, they performed improvements and prepped the area covertly. The improvements they did were meant to blend in. One thing they improved over here was a water pump for this small town. They fixed the pump, made sure that water was still able to be drawn from the pump. They then constructed a pump house around it using salvaged materials from some of these buildings that had collapsed. They tried to blend it in so it looked like it was part of this town. At the same time, they also dug in a couple caches and left in materials. They left in supplies. At this cache point, they left extra food, ammunition, and medical supplies, which was protected against the elements. They hid it underneath the debris from this collapsed building. What they did, they first took a picture of the building, what it looked like. What did the pile of debris look like? They then cleared off the area, removed the floorboards that were rotting, that were still left right above the ground. They then dug it down, made themselves a shallow bunker underground. They put 55-gallon drums inside here with the supplies inside. They then put the dirt back over it to conceal the drums. They then put the floorboards back over the top. They then took some of the debris that was left. They used some of it over here at the same time. You had 2 projects going on in the same area. They then made it look as close as possible to the picture that they took beforehand. They did the same type of thing down here, but in this location they concealed building materials, tentage, cots, and other needed things for making shelters. They also went through, patched some holes in the roofs on these 2 buildings using salvaged materials from the buildings that were fallen down, that were too far gone. They tried to blend it in so it was not too obvious that repairs had been done. Now, when they improved these buildings, they made sure that they would still be drafty. They did not close off all the air entrances or wind entrances into the building. They did that so that the airflow would help keep down the thermal signature on these buildings. They had sufficient materials inside this cache that they were basically able to, during occupation, construct a box within a box. They made a smaller structure inside here with some space between that structure and the outside wall. So basically tentage and tarps inside here in both buildings. The airflow would help keep the outside walls cooler and hopefully cut down on any thermal leak through. Now, when they occupied the area, they occupied it the same way as you would occupy an area in the woods, like in the previous 3 videos. They did their security element, they checked out the entire area, they came in and occupied. Now, in order to cut down on their detectable signature, only 1 platoon is allowed in the perimeter at any one time. In the current rotation, 3rd platoon is on defense. 1st platoon and 2nd platoon are out on operations for the next week to 2 weeks. The remaining elements of the heavy weapons platoon, the engineer platoon, are assisting with the defense. Now, with the heavy weapons platoon, we are on a hillside. This is the top of the hill, this is downhill, this is a trail that was coming in that the locals were still using when they were coming through the area during hunting. And it was also being used by game. Because this is the likely high-speed avenue of approach, this comes up from the bottom of the mountain. This road, this trail, and the area down here is covered by the Mark 19 heavy machine gun position, the automatic grenade launcher. The team for this position stays in this building here. We also have the 60mm mortars set up here next to the 3rd platoon headquarters building. The crews for these mortars would also stay inside this building. The members of 3rd platoon that are not out on fighting positions or conducting local security patrols stay in tentage that is set up across the trail from the headquarters. The 81mm mortars from the heavy weapons platoon are located near the top of the hill. In an area that was a little bit clearer, they took out some saplings to make sure it was nice, wide, and open so that when they fired the mortars, they would not be hitting trees. The mortar crews stay in tentage that is set up near their mortars. The M250 caliber from the heavy weapons, heavy machine gun squad is set up in an anti-aircraft position near the top of the hill. Also cleared out some of the vegetation around it to give it good line of sight. The crew for the M2 is staying in a tent near the position. Most of the headquarters personnel, at least the ones that would be inside the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, stay immediately inside the headquarters area here or in tents around it. Your GP Tinies, your 2-man shelter halves. We have a first aid station that's set up here where the medics that are not out with the platoons conducting operations are back here taking care of the sick and wounded. The ones that have not been sent into a community for additional medical care. Now, these 4 red X's here are buildings that fell down. Before the conflict, these 2 buildings, the same way these caches were set up, they cleared away the debris, they dug bunkers underneath or pits underneath, and then covered it up with the debris. When the area was occupied, they opened up an area that they had already created as the doorway, and then the appropriate element went in and occupied that space. Now, one way or one thing you can do, I'll just mention this. If you come across a building like this, it's fallen down, it had a basement or a cellar underneath, still go through, take the picture so that you see how the debris is all laying inside the hole. Clean the hole out. Possibly dig it down just a little bit further, put some support under the existing walls, because it may be field stone walls. That's the only reason the pit is still there. Well, as you dig down, probably slip some bricks, some additional rocks, maybe some concrete blocks underneath that walls as you're digging down farther, and then cover the whole thing with concrete. You will then get timbers, heavy duty timbers, possibly cut down some trees in the area, bring in the logs, bring them across, cover the entire hole with the logs. Then put down some type of protective sheeting over the top, some plastic, cover it with dirt, and then put the debris back over the top, camouflaging it in, making it look like it's natural, like the building fell down, there was no basement or cellar underneath. That will give you a concealed bunker underneath. Now we have the mess tent set up over here. The mess crew would stay with the mess tent where they prepare the foods. These here are field telephone lines. The junction form is here at the headquarters, so there'll be a radio telephone operator or two in here for handling any calls that would come in. So you got a phone set up with the 81mm mortars, another one with the M2 position, one down in this building and one down with the 3rd platoon. There's another one located out in that direction. Now, one tactic employed by the North Vietnamese Army when they were in South Vietnam, they had radios that were supplied by the Warsaw Pact and also the Chinese. One thing they learned is that the Allies would use radio direction finding equipment, determine where that radio transmitter is at, and then they would pound that area with airstrikes and artillery. So one thing they would do is they would have the encampment locate the radio some distance away. It could be a kilometer or more away. It would be connected by field telephone or by runners. So what we have with this militia, they have a field telephone which goes out as far as the phone can handle. At the end of that line, they will have another position that will be set up where there will be a radio set up for receiving reports and possibly sending out coded messages. That position where the radio is at will be separated from the antenna because they will have tower antenna, something like an OE254 or some other type of mast antenna that they can erect. They have that out at the farthest length of cable that they can set out and still not degrade their signals appreciably. So that way, if the enemy determines where the signals are coming from, they send in mortars, they send in artillery, they'll just hit the antenna. The radio crew should be dug in the bunkers so that they're protected, and all of that is far away from the base camp, so there should be no casualties here. Let's see, what else did I miss? Okay, some information for field sanitation. There should be at least one latrine per platoon. And that's something I forgot to put on my map here. There would be a latrine located here, which would cover the people in this area. There would be another latrine located over here, which would be for 3rd platoon. There would be another latrine located up here, which would be for everyone staying up here. Now, the latrines need to be located at least 100 meters away from any food sources. the mess area, and also food storage. That way you cut down on, you know, bugs coming into the area and leaving their larvae and their eggs behind, which could get people sick also. Latrines should also be located a minimum of 30 meters away, preferably downslope from your water sources. Your food storage also should not be located near stores of ammunition also, especially any stores of chemicals like petroleum products. Now the guard crew, which would be 3rd Platoon and then the heavy weapons teams, they should receive a minimum of 3 to 4 hours continuous sleep per 24-hour period. Now the trainees that would be with the headquarters platoon, they'll probably be located in this building down here. Their training will be conducted by the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers from 3rd Platoon, from the heavy weapons platoon elements that are still left behind, and also the engineer team that is here. They will conduct the training for those recruits, so that hopefully when the next rotation happens, 3rd Platoon goes out, the next platoon would take over their job on defense. Then some of those recruits are done, they've been fully trained, they can join their platoons and they can head out. Ones that still need to finish the training will still stay with the headquarters platoon until training complete. Now I got here a small list of the types of things you should plan for inside a base camp. I mentioned 1 latrine per platoon, a mess area for the preparation of food, platoon sleep areas, and also weapons team sleep areas, the headquarters talk area, a first aid station or first aid area, a radio shack which should be located away from the base camp, and they should supply their own security, so that team needs to have enough people to watch the radios and provide security. You should have quartermaster areas or caches, your heavy weapons positions. You should have bunkers and fighting positions. You would have some that would overwatch the trail here, one here, watching the trail down over here. You would have some on the other side of the ridge watching for elements approaching that way. Some positions over here to make sure that they're not going to get enemy patrols coming in from that area. You should also have a trash pit or at least trash disposal area. I did not put it on here. It would be located down this trail farther out, away from the mess areas, water, and also where the troops are sleeping. Now if you got any further questions on this, I know I'm missing stuff because I kind of threw this together fairly quick. If you got questions, post them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essay ons.